Hi, it's Ken here. I hope you enjoyed the last video about category objects. We're going to show you now some slightly more complex configs, some cascading, etc. Hope you enjoy the video. In the last video, we showed you how to set up some really simple category objects within the dashboard. So we can now go in and pick and search down into Glasgow, look at Jim Crosland and find out just the data that relates to him. But what we're going to do is we're going to explore some of the additional features around category objects in this video. So if I go back to the configuration screen and open up the category objects category, so just double click it, and up it opens. We're going to concentrate on this bottom panel, the category objects panel, and there's a few things we can do. First of all, we can decide whether the category objects are going to appear at the top of the dashboard or on the left hand side of the dashboard. Now I won't go through that, that's fairly self-explanatory, but the first and most important button here is the Cascade filter selections, and I'll explain to you quickly how that's working. Essentially, by default we sit that on, because as I select my northern region, what I want is the drop lists to the right of it to just express data for the north. So if I just show you that selected with all region here, I've got the list of all my stores, those in the north and the south. But if I select, for example, Midlands here, I want it now just to restrict those branches which are in the Midlands. And it stops our users creating data, so selecting the north here and then selecting a branch within the south. So it's a really key way to stop users seeing no data all the time. And as we say, by default we switch that function on, but what I'm going to show you quickly is what that function looks like off. So if I untick it, save it, and then just rebuild my page here, my category objects up here. Now when I select my north, Midlands, whatever it might be, that no longer restricts that drop list. So I can select Midlands and Leeds. Now what you'll notice is I just get that problem for the end users with no data. So by default it usually is worth turning it on, but there are some circumstances where it's really handy not having that cascade functionality on. I'm going to go back into my categories again and come down into my category objects here. I can also choose to cascade up. Now by default we turn this one off, but it can be a really useful function as well. If I just click save here and go and rebuild my tabs now with that cascade up turned on, what now happens is the cascade will not just happen from right to left, it will also happen from left to right. So if I select Benedict Astley here, I'll see straight away that they work for the Liverpool branch and the North branch. If I select Jim Crosland, I'll see that he's in the Glasgow branch. So it just allows me to really quickly cascade those objects up and down. Sometimes that's a very, very useful feature, but sometimes it confuses users by having too much of those things turned on. So as I say, by default we tend to turn that one off. So I'll turn that off again. What I'm now going to show you is we can decide exactly how we want these objects to be presented to the end user. So we can have them as drop lists, we can have them as sliders. Sliders are really good for date ranges, so what I'm going to do is turn my date range into a slider at the bottom here. I'm also going to, for my salesman, use what we call a multi-picker. Now with those changed, I'm going to save that and rebuild my category. And if I come back to the category objects again, what I now have is drop lists for the first two, this type field with a little list of values next to it, and basically that allows me to go in and start to find users within here. So I can go in and start to pick and search. Really useful when you want to multi-pick users within here. Click and save those and I'll get all of those users that I've selected. And then the final option on the right hand side here is my date range slider. So I can actually use that to go and pick a particular date range within there. And I can use any combination of those objects that I want within there. So I'm just going to jump back onto my configuration screen and go back to my categories here and open up my category objects. What I do is I just turn those back to drop lists to keep things nice and simple. Now we're going to do a third video in a little while which shows you some really advanced functionality within the dashboard, and that's what this filter tick box is for, but we don't need to worry about that one at the moment, so we'll just skip over that one for the time being. The next useful feature is this box here, and this is where we can set a default item for a category object. So for example, if I want the dashboard to start up and I want it to start up with a north as the default value, then all I need to do is either pick the item out of this pick list, or I could type it in there. But I'll save this and show you exactly what happens with that item in there and picked. So if I go to my category objects now, this first drop list picks up and starts and is defaulted into the north. I can still pick other regions and it works in just the same way as before, but I can, force it to start at that one level. A little beyond this video, and we will do some of this config in the next video, is the fact that actually we can use a variable in here, and it's really worth watching the next video for. And by using a variable, we can actually make different users log on and have different default items appear within their drop lists. So some people might want to log in and see the north, some people the south, etc. And we'll cover that in a later video. The next option here is, can we select all? And if I just jump back to my category objects here, that's where we can actually select all regions at once, so we can have a look at all together. And really it's actually like removing the filter. In some circumstances we don't want that on, so we don't want people to be able to select everything together. They must pick one item, and that's where we can untick this box and say don't allow select all. So if I save this now and again rebuild my categories here and go back to category objects, it's now forcing in the top item in there, so I can't select all. I must always select one item within there, and that's a really useful feature. So I go back into my category objects again, and within my category objects here I'll just tick that back on. The next value here is the all text to show. So at the moment we've got salesman in here, and if we have a look at the drop list it says all salesmen, but that might not be the text that we want to show the end users. What we might want it to say is all sales people, or we might even want it to say something like everybody in here, and we can choose exactly what text we want to put into that drop list. So if I save the all text here and come back in and rebuild this with my category objects here, it will now say everybody at the top of the list rather than all salesmen or all salespeople. Final item on here, if I jump back in here for one last time, is the exclude cascade. Now it's a nice useful feature where you can exclude an item from the cascade, so you can get it to opt out. So in this scenario here, region, north and salesman, there's quite a natural hierarchy between them. As I select the region, I only want to see certain stores. As I select stores, I only want to see certain salespeople. But actually all of these regions and stores hopefully make sales for every month and year, so there's no point in filtering that list at that point. So we can exclude the cascade from this drop list. And if I save that one final time and rebuild, what that will now mean is we save ourselves a database fetch, so it can be much more efficient. So if I select a particular salesperson in here, it'll drop the chart straight in. It doesn't have to rebuild that drop list at all. And I'll just show you one really useful feature before we finish, which is if I right click on a drop list, I can actually view the XML for it. And this is a great way of finding out exactly what's going on. So for example, if I view the XML of this drop list with the north selected, I can see in the select statement that north does exist within there, so it is filtering by the northern region. Whereas if I do the same for the sales month and year and view the XML and come down to its query, what I'll see is there is not that restriction. So I can see exactly what that's doing from a fetch point of view. So it isn't applying that filter. So that's sort of the next step up for you in using category objects, how you can make them a little bit more sophisticated. We'll be doing a third video which shows you some really complex config and what you can absolutely achieve with them. But for now, that's all. Thanks very much. Goodbye. Ken out. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you're enjoying using category objects. If you need any more information, check out our other videos or just get in touch. Thanks again. Bye.